Welcome to the latest episode of the bi-weekly Special Fathers Network Dads Zoom Calls. Tonight the topic is adaptive athletics, and we're privileged to have one of our dads who's created a program for individuals who are adaptive athletes. And with us tonight is Clayton Frech, who is the founder of Angel City Sports, who puts on the Angel City Games in Southern California. And what I'm going to do is ask Clayton to make a brief self-introduction and then tell us what journey he's been on as far as getting involved in something over the last 6-7 years like you have. So Clayton, the Zoom stage is yours.
All right, by way of introduction, I'm the father of 3 boys, been married for almost 20 years, have a Labradoodle, and we're fostering 2 little kittens right now, which has created total chaos in my household. They're feral, so we're trying to calm them down to human beings. I mostly grew up in Santa Barbara, a little bit on the East Coast in Maryland, and had an early career really focused on the environment, and I worked in the government a couple times and did some research around the environment. Got my MBA, shifted into a business career, climbing the corporate ladder, running various sized operations, $150 million operations, and always had a foot in the nonprofit space, really at the board and sort of fundraising level. And 16 years ago actually, my eldest son was born with some disabilities, some limb differences. I'll share more on that in a minute. And my wife and I looked at each other and we thought, hey, the world needs more disability advocates. She and I were both environmentalists and environmental advocates. So we kind of shifted our family's focus really to be around disability. And I guess I sort of leaned into that in 2015 when I left the corporate world to start Angel City Sports with some friends and family, basically. So it's been quite a journey, and this is probably the more stressful period of my life and career with this nonprofit, but also probably the most rewarding. So that's kind of the arc of kind of my life and career. I've always been pretty active. Grew up, skiing, hiking, sailing, surfing, skateboarding. I still surf. I still skateboard with my 9-year-old. Pretty active, and so kind of makes sense that I would end up doing a sports related organization just because I love it so much. But it is something that I never thought I would end up in sports or disability for that matter. So.
Well, thanks for the introduction. And I'd like you to spend at least a few minutes talking about Ezra, your oldest, and the journey that you and Bahar were on from the time of his birth, right? Sort of stunning experience that you had in the delivery room.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is we were young parents, beautiful pregnancy. My wife ate really healthy, was really in a good state of mind the whole pregnancy. And we were at Cedars-Sinai, big hospital, top hospital in Los Angeles. And our firstborn comes out after a long period of hide and seek. And his missing limbs. The first thing I noticed, we didn't know, this was all a surprise in the delivery room. The first thing I noticed was the hand was just completely different on one side. I could see the right hand's nice big hand came out, and then the left side, all I could see was like this one skinny finger. And so I first thought maybe I just didn't get a good look at it. But man, the more I looked at it, there was no hand. There was no hand structure at all. And then I noticed one of his legs looked really different. And so it turned out that he had what's called FFU, femur fibula ulna syndrome. And it's a really rare new genetic event that affects those 3 limb bones. And for him, it only hit the left side, which is kind of even more rare. Often it's just lower or just upper. And so he didn't have a knee, he didn't have a shin bone. And so the left leg kind of curved back up, and he had a foot that was sort of stuck in his waist. It would never, you couldn't bend it or move it or anything. It was just sort of stuck. And then he had this hand that just really had one finger. It looks like two of the fingers got fused. So it was kind of a bigger finger. There's one finger sticking out of that little hand he had. And David's recalling my, my story of being in the delivery room, because, at the time, I never even imagined something like this could happen. We weren't prepared at all. And so I almost fainted. I mean, I got like lightheaded and I got flush, and I had to like grab onto the side of the bed. And cause I was really the only one that saw it at first. So that was like a weird thing. Like, oh my gosh, I gotta say something. And, I remember like it was yesterday, there was an old nurse that had been around probably 30, 40 years in the delivery room, probably delivered thousands of babies. And she just gave me this look like, it's going to be okay, and get your shit together. It was like somehow, through her eyes, she was able to give me those very different messages. So hold on one second. Dude, what's up? I'm recording. We gotta go. Sorry about that. You have to edit that out. So, we started our journey in disability. And the nice thing about our journey was everything else checked out great. He's able to nurse, and he was super alert. Kid was like tracking to Bahar and I as we were walking around the delivery room. But we had to process this, and it was a pretty emotional few days in the hospital. And I would say, we had all the questions that every parent has. What's their life going to be like? Are they going to be able to get married? Are they going to be able to get jobs? Are they going to be able to have a normal life? Like what, you just start to spin on some of those questions. We were really blessed early with some great advice, mostly from the kind of docs that showed up to sort of support us. We got a diagnosis before we left the hospital. We tested him like crazy, so we knew he was healthy otherwise. It was just a limb issue. And one of the orthopedic guys that stopped by, he gave us like a prescription of like what to do. He said, go to Shriners to get your prosthetics when he starts to stand, because then you'll run into other kids and stuff, and you'll see that you're not the only one around. And he's like, once you put a prosthetic on this kid, you're going to be chasing them around just like any other kids. It's no big deal. And then he said, before he's 3 years old, remove the lower part of the leg and take whatever you can from that foot and put it on the hand. So he basically told us to do a toe to hand transplantation surgery, which just is such a mouthful, right? I mean, even the word prosthetic, when you're 2 or 3 days into a new child that you weren't expecting to have differences. And now I'm talking about toe to hand amputation. These are just stressful words, but we took it in and we basically started, kind of implementing his plan right away. And what's really interesting about Ezra's journey is, and it connects back to Angel City, which is the kid loved sports from almost right out of the chute. Like he could barely sit up, and I got him a ball, and he just went crazy for a little ball we would throw back and forth. And, the second he could walk, I got him a little basketball hoop. He's playing basketball. He watched thousands of Laker games. I mean, he literally learned how to count by twos first before ones. I mean, he knew how to count basketball count, not regular count. Just obsessed with sport. And there's a little bit of how I was as a kid, but I wasn't as determined, and I wasn't as focused, and I wasn't as coachable. So he became this really good athlete. And he played on a running blade, because after this surgery that we did 2.5 at 2.5, his functionality, leg functionality, we went from 1 to 2 fingers. We improved his hand, we improved the leg and fitting prosthesis. By the time he's 4, we get him a running blade. So this kid's just like so mobile, like fast. And so he just always loved sports. And so he played mainstream sports. He played rec sports, and eventually made a club basketball team, which is really hard on a prosthetic, specialized in above knee amputee. So that blade is not giving you any stability. So he's playing on one leg, and he was amazing basketball player. And so like this kid just sort of found his love. And I would say, the I had a tough first summer when he was born. Like I thought being a dad, an important part of being a dad was playing with your kids. And I didn't know that you could do sports. I didn't know sports existed for people with physical disability. And my particular passion is surfing, which I always imagined surfing with my kids. And so that summer I was sort of like playing, I was sort of, in my head a little bit, and I would go surf and just cry about the fact that my definition of fatherhood was unattainable. And at least I thought so. And so the good thing about kind of taking that low road emotionally is that eventually you kind of run out of road. You gotta get off of the road. So, I start to Google and look around amputee surfing, right? And there's a little bit out there. And so we sort of stumble into the adaptive sports community, first through a partner of ours now, the Challenged Athletes Foundation, that does great work. They give grants so the athletes can afford equipment or travel or training. And so we met an amputee surfer from Brazil, and we're sort of inspired and met Paralympians who are still our friends today, and realized this kid could do anything he wants. He can literally do any sport. And so fast forward to 2013, he's 8 years old now. And I take him on the advice of a Paralympian, John Siciliano. When he's a dad, I'll invite him to this community. He's not a dad yet, but his leg fell off in the 96 Paralympics in Atlanta, and he hopped to the finish line, and there was not a dry eye in the stadium. And John's advice was, hey, when he's about 8 years old, take him to a big Paralympic competition. So I did that. I took him to Oklahoma, to really the main event in our community called the Endeavor Games. And we just fell in love with adaptive and Paralympic sport. And he, in particular, excelled in track. Just broke a bunch of national records in the long jump that first day. I think he even had some other records in the 100 meter and some other events. And so he's 16 now. So the last 8 years, he's just been demolishing all of the youth records in his classification as an above knee amputee. And in fact, 2 years ago in 2019, as a just minted 14-year-old, he made the US Paralympic track team, went to the World Championships, went to the Junior Worlds, went to the Pan American Games. So he's already traveled to Switzerland, Lima, Peru, and Dubai for Team USA. And he was planning to go to the Tokyo Games last summer. Now he's planning to go to the Tokyo Games in August. And he has to qualify, but he's already on the team. So he should be fine for Tokyo. So it's a pretty epic story about this child in general. And after we saw this meet in 2013, I came back to Los Angeles, and I was just on a mission. It was like, I call my lightning bolt moment. It was a moment where I knew I had to do this. I just knew I had to lean into this movement and create something unique and special for these athletes. And so we started with the Angels League Games, and then we've kind of expanded into all kinds of additional programming, clinics and equipment. And we're doing over 100 events a year in a normal year. Just creating access points and places where these athletes can find a coach, find a friend, find a mentor, feel like they are part of a community. And, what I like to say is they feel like they belong, because as most of the fathers in your community know, our kids don't feel like they belong day to day. And so by bringing this community together, we are giving them a day or a weekend or whatever, where they really feel like they're part of something. They're not the only ones out there. And I like to say it's sort of a place to recharge their batteries or recharge their soul, so then they can go out and fight the battle of ableism and discrimination and being counted out and being stared at and being pointed at and all the things that they deal with every day. So it's been a challenge. Starting a nonprofit is not easy, but it's been a real blessing, because I see the impact we have on athletes, and especially finding athletes that didn't know sports existed for them.
Well, let's talk about the big picture. so that we can differentiate for our viewers that there's a whole range of different types of athletics for people with disability. And most people who are familiar with athletics and disability think about Special Olympics.
Yep.
And Special Olympics has been around for 53 years. They're in every state around the US, they're in 120 something countries around the world. And they've made athletics available, a narrow number of different types of disciplines available to people mostly with intellectual disabilities. And I'd like you to spend a minute or two just on a big picture basis defining what the difference is between Special Olympics and adaptive athletics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just kind of cover all disability, at least the best that I can. So I think there's really sort of three buckets when it comes to sports, and there probably should be a fourth. I'll talk a little bit about the autistic community in a second. Um, so Special Olympics covers athletes with intellectual disabilities. You also people use the word cognitive or developmental disabilities. It tends to be Down syndrome, but there's also some other things that get included in there. Sometimes there's also a physical manifestation as well. Sometimes, but it's more common than not. Their bodies work. It's really about their brain functioning. So that's Special Olympics, about 2% of the population per the Special Olympics organization themselves. The adaptive and Paralympic sports world, which is where we live and work, covers anyone with a physical disability or a visual impairment or blindness. And so there is a whole set of sports that are unique to the visually impaired and blind, but they are really under the overall rubric of the adaptive and Paralympic sports movement. In fact, the blind can do many Paralympic sports, and some are even specifically created for them, like goalball. And so when you talk about sort of physical disability, the list is so long, I don't even have enough time here, but amputees, spinal cord injuries, traumatic brain injuries, cerebral palsy, stroke, spina bifida, dwarfism, all the degenerative neurological muscular, disorders, MS, muscular dystrophy, all kinds of things that no one's even heard of. And this list is so long. And we get people through accidents, through illness, and congenital situations as well. So it's sort of like they're coming in from all different places all throughout their lives. I think we start out somewhere between 1 to 1.5% of babies born have some type of physical disability. But the numbers are really bad. The numbers are really hard to find, and it's very underreported at birth. And so, they miss things all the time. It's fascinating how many things the hospitals miss about these babies that are born. And then I would add the deaf as sort of a third group that does have their own sports. They have the Deaf Olympics. They have their own sort of organizations and structure there. They don't really do Paralympic sport. I'm sure there's been some over the years that have sort of crossed over, but really, really not common at all. I mentioned the autistic community, which is really interesting. I feel like they're kind of being left out right now. So it's not always easy to integrate them into mainstream sport. They don't really qualify. And again, it depends a little bit on the level. There are a couple Paralympic sports, 3 actually, that have a low IQ classification. So that's swimming, track, and table tennis. And so there is a little bit of crossover. A lot of people, a lot of young athletes with autism can kind of fit into those classes. But generally speaking, our coaches, our systems, our sports are not really designed for the autistic community. So I feel kind of bad because people ask me this all the time because the prevalence of this is so high these days. They're really, it's market to market, region to region, whether there's anything for those kids. I think the best strategy is just try to integrate them and sort of force schools and force, coaches to sort of figure it out on their own. But I have a lot of empathy for those coaches because I don't know that it's always easy, but those stories of integrating those athletes seem to be wild successes, when they get it right. So I'm hopeful that will become a movement over time, and they'll kind of figure out their spot, whether it's within the mainstream sports system, or who knows, maybe the Paralympics would expand and kind of cover that community at some point. But so that's the breakdown. Again, our community, when you look at the general population of people, adults and kids, including the elderly with physical disabilities, visual impairments, et cetera, we're at 15+%, probably higher because of underreporting. It just tells you how society is. People don't even want to admit that they have a physical disability. They just don't even want to admit. They don't want to go down that road. They're worried about getting fired. They don't want to be discriminated against. They don't want to be left behind on anything. And so I just met a woman on a plane. She's had brain surgery, all kinds of balance issues and sort of physical effects of basically having a brain injury. And she just looked at me like, I don't think she'd ever really admitted it, and I'm like, our coaches can figure this out for you. This is what they do. Your body's not working the same way as it might've been before your surgery. So I think we're underreported, but 15%, it's 50 million people in the United States. So these are just staggering numbers. And man, it doesn't discriminate against race or economic class or anything. I mean, this just hits us all, our passion at Angel City Sports is really lower income folks that just don't even have the bandwidth or the resources to solve this. In my case, I was taking my child all over the country to get him access to sports, to just learn the sports. And so I know that's not realistic for most people. And so that's why Angel City was created.
Well, thanks for the overview. That's very helpful. And let's sort of drill down on what you've been doing the last 6 or 7 years, what the organization does, and the not only week-to-week, month-to-month activities, but you do this annual event, or at least most years you've done this annual event, the Angel City Games.
So we came out of the box in 2015. It took me 2 years to get this thing launched. Tells you how challenging this is. We came out of the hopper with the Angel City Games. It's now presented by the Hartford, so we have a title sponsor for the Angel City Games. And the vision for the games is to create a safe place for new athletes to both learn and compete in Paralympic sport. And our goal over time is to have all summer Paralympic sports. So there's 22 sports on the roster for the Tokyo Paralympic Games this summer. It changes, same way the Olympics. Some years sports drop out and they add in a new sport. They just dropped sailing and one of the forms of soccer, and they added in taekwondo and badminton for Tokyo. So every 4 years, you're going to see a little bit different mix of sports. But our goal is to have all the summer Paralympic sports covered at the Angel City Games for all ages, all skill levels, all abilities. So literally a mass convening of this community. So that's sort of where we started, and that our event now is really the largest event of its kind in the country, even though it's not that big, but we get 400 plus athletes. We hope to be in the thousands, maybe ultimately in the tens of thousands of athletes, and be the largest sporting event in the world if we can kind of crack the code in awareness and get people out. Since 2015, when we launched with the games, we realized there's a lot of other problems. So we realize not everybody's going to be comfortable going to a big fancy event with, celebrities and music and entertainment. Like, there's just a lot going on. So, and I know that's intimidating for some people. So we've created, like in 2019, we did close to 70 or 80 clinics throughout the year. So that's almost, it's 1 or 2 a week. We do them on the weekends so people can schedule and book, get their travel figured out, so you don't have to leave work or school. And that's, a clinic for us is just a 2 to 4 hour typically opportunity to learn the sport and play and compete in it a little bit, get comfortable, learn what the equipment is, meet some coaches and have some fun. It's an entry point. It's a starting point. It's a place where we can bring someone in like a little bit mellower environment to get them going. We have a couple teams. We have a cheer team. We have a wheelchair football team. We're building some other teams, which is kind of fun. And then, and the other really important piece of what we do is equipment. So we have about 100 pieces of adaptive sports equipment. So you think about a racing wheelchair or a basketball or tennis chair. This is specific equipment to these sports. And so we loan that to new athletes so they can try the sports, decide if they like it. They can give us the chairs back if they go buy or get a grant to get the equipment that fits them more specifically. So we're loaning them more of a generic program chair. But this is a real gap, and this is a gap across the country, which is it's really hard to find a loaner piece of equipment to even decide if you like any of these sports, especially if you're use a wheelchair to get around, especially in that scenario. And we also kind of help connect people to resources to get them a running blade or whatever they need. Honestly, like one of the things that I'm excited about as we go forward that we really leaned into the last couple of years is thinking, okay, we're going to convene for sport. We're going to bring people together through sport. But what else can we do once we've done that, right? What other value can we bring to them? And so we've done a lot of seminars around career development and financial planning, educational decisions, general health and wellness, yoga, breathing, mindfulness, you name it, meditation. We're doing a mental fitness, mental strength training for elites and developing athletes right now with a sports psychologist. So we're really trying to use sports as the sort of the carrot, I guess, to bring you in. But then once you're in, realize that we're gonna do our best to provide you guidance and support in all these different areas. So we call that beyond sport, but it's just a sort of an effort to be about more than sport, because most of these athletes are not going to be go on to be elite athletes and get sponsors and live the life of a traveling athlete that my son already seems to be living. Most of them are going to be weekend warriors like I am, right? So what else can we do to help them out in life?
Yeah, well, thank you. One of the things that comes to mind, and I remember you mentioning this when we did your podcast interview number 7, way back when, we're at more than 150 now. And the Summer Olympics are coming to Los Angeles in 2028, if I remember.
Yep.
And you had made a comment that will stick in my mind for the rest of time, which was pivoting off of what was going on in London. And why don't you relate that? Because I know exactly what I'm talking about.
So I think what I said, and you correct me if I'm wrong, David, is 2028 provides us an opportunity to sort of swiftly and more sustainably change societal perception of people living with physical disabilities, and sort of, I don't know if you can eradicate a stigma, but can you sort of knock it down a lot? People with disabilities across the spectrum are not really seen in media. They're not really seen on TV. They're not really seen in sports programming. It sort of just doesn't, it just doesn't get any real airtime. And I know Special Olympics, the World Games was on TV, so that was super cool. People generally know about Special Olympics, but certainly on our side, on the adaptive and Paralympic side, is very, very low awareness of what it is. And so that's a real barrier, because if someone tells you you can't do sport, or someone tells you to go to Special Olympics and then you get turned away, and you don't know that they're all wrong, you might accept, no, it's not possible. You might accept, right, the wrong answer, unfortunately. And so we feel that having the Paralympic Games coming to Los Angeles in 2028 is a moment to change societal perceptions. They did this in London in 2012. And what happened in London is the Olympics sold out really fast. And, the community, the population was like, well, what else can we do? And then they sort of they sort of moved, the population into buying tickets for the Paralympics, which is very good, better than giving the tickets away, because it actually increases revenue and there's a legacy. So you can kind of fund things afterwards, right? But also the organizers of the London 2012 Paralympic Games and Olympic Games, they had diversity and inclusion in their sites the entire time. So the second they brought volunteers in, they were teaching them about this. The second they had a sponsor, they were teaching them about the Paralympics and about this community. And so in the UK, attitudes towards people with disabilities have changed for the better. More people with disabilities are able to get jobs. It's really changed society in the UK. And I think that's listen, we're a bigger, messier, less organized country to some extent. So maybe it's harder to move the needle as far as they moved it in the UK. But I think we have this moment to move the needle. And so I think 2028 is something that we're all kind of looking at. I've been pretty close to the organizers and the executive team over there, giving them my support and input to the extent that they want it or need it. And I think we're going to be talking a lot about legacy and impact, in the next few years leading up to 2028.
And I think the tagline is, between me and you, this is what I remembered, was that the Olympics are going to be the warm-up games for the Paralympics.
Yes, that's the hope, right? And I say that sort of in a cheeky way, but I also do believe that our stories in our sports are really awesome.
Yeah.
The backstory. I've been a fan of the Olympics since I was a little kid. I've always watched the Olympics. I'll watch all the sports. I think NBC does an amazing job covering the Olympic Games, and you love the backstories on these athletes. And I think our opportunity to do that within the Paralympic system, just plug my computer in here, is really interesting because our stories are just so powerful.
They're more powerful on average, right? Because
the sports are really cool. Blade running and wheelchair rugby. Like, who knew these? These sports are really, really cool. They're really dynamic. And for Tokyo coming up this August, NBC's running 1,200 hours of programming. Now, it probably won't all be on the main, Channel 4, but it'll be in their other channels. We only had 60 hours in Rio in 2016. So that alone is really interesting to start to, people are going to start to understand what these sports are, and, maybe not listen to people that tell them that the sports don't exist for their child or for their friend or for whoever.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Let's spend a few minutes talking about some of the variety of programs that you're aware of. And I'll just start by mentioning one of the other dads in the network. Jim Elliott started a program called diveheart.org, and it's been around for 20 years, and it allows people who have different types of challenges. These could be paraplegics, quadriplegics, people that are blind, people that have autism, and a whole variety of different conditions, to go scuba diving, right? And going underwater, not like snorkeling, just putting your face in water, but putting a tank on, having a regulator in your mouth, seems so far-fetched, right, for somebody with, quote, special needs or disability. But again, they've broken down that paradigm, and they're training people not only around the U.S., but all over the world to dive that wouldn't otherwise think that they could do something like that. And there's been skiing for people that are missing limbs, or people that are blind or deaf, for that matter. I'm wondering, what are some of the other programs that you're familiar with, whether you partnered with them or you just have a strong familiarity, given the fact that you've created some visibility for yourself?
Yeah, I'll list a couple places to just sort of be connected and get information to start, and then maybe I'll break down some of the sports and sort of how I would kind of structure this. So, right now, certainly love people to follow Angel City Sports, and we do our best to sort of keep people updated and what's going on. Another organization I'm on the board of is Move United. So we've combined two national organizations into one, and we are a chapter-based organization. So we have chapters all over the country. So Move United is a great place to find chapters that might be in your area. It's not comprehensive because the organizations have to join Move United as a chapter. So there are a lot more organizations. So I'll talk a little bit about the landscape. But it's a nice entry point. The U.S. Paralympic Committee has historically maintained a pretty nice database and list of organizations. I believe it's still up on their website that people can track down. And also the partner that I mentioned earlier, the Challenge Athletes Foundation, they they have a nice list of organizations. Not one of these is comprehensive. I will tell you that. So anyone looking for information, just keep digging and digging and digging. And certainly you can reach out to our team at Angel City Sports, either on social or info@angelcitysports.org or whatever. Email me, Clayton at angelcitysports.org, and we'll figure out what we can do to kind of get you connected to the right organization. But it's going to take a little bit of research, because the community has probably got, I don't know, 1,000, 1,500, maybe 2,000 really small organizations that are very local and often are single sport focused. So it just adds to the complexity of how do you find them. Most of them are not members of Move United. Most of them are not on the websites I just listed. They're little local groups that probably do great work, but they're so narrowly focused, they just don't have the resources. They're not scaling. They're not even very visible. And most don't even market themselves very well. So I would kind of break it into like a few groups. So you mentioned winter sports, right? There are a lot of different winter sports, and there are some that are Paralympic sports and some that are not. But basically any sport, winter or summer or anything can be done in an adaptive way. So if you are interested in adaptive snowshoeing, I'm sure there's people out there that do that. It's not an Paralympic sport, but you could probably get some advice and find an organization that sort of cares about that. You just got to probably research. There are some really great winter programs, tend to be at the bigger, wealthier ski mountains, where you see really robust programs. Often there's grants, often it's even free. They try to charge you, but if you can't afford it, I know they would, many of them would help. Like we go to Mammoth a lot, and I know that they're really accommodating if you can't afford it. So there's a whole set of winter sports. Those mountain resorts and those programs flip and do summer mountain kind of outdoorsy programs during the summer. So that's sort of the flip side of the winter sports system. So they're doing mountain biking and whitewater rafting and rock climbing and all kinds of cool stuff. And then there are some, a lot of other just outdoors focused organizations that don't live at a ski mountain. So if you're in a community, it's a little more rural or, kind of a rural part of the country, there may be some adaptive outdoors, organizations that do fishing or rafting or whatever. Again, many of them are very like single sport focused, but you can kind of look. And then where Angel City has lived the last few years since we got started in 2013 is in the summer sports side. So, we'll offer over 20 different sports that I would call sort of summer Olympic and Paralympic type sports. Some are not part of the Paralympic Games yet. We're going to get into some surfing. We've done some skateboarding, rock climbing. Those are not Paralympic sports yet, but they are adaptive sports. So, so that's kind of how I would break it down. There's sort of the winter orgs that are, kind of mostly based in a mountain, and there's sort of more general outdoorsy organizations that literally do anything under the sun you could imagine. And Dive Heart is a great partner, and they do programming all over the country. We've worked with them many times. And so that's and I know the scuba experience for someone, especially uses a wheelchair, is I've just heard so many amazing things about that. And then that sort of third bucket of kind of non-winter, non-outdoorsy, I would call sort of summer sports or sort of fair weather, sports.
Well, thank you for the overview. Very enlightening, very inspiring too. And I'm hoping that Ezra has an amazing experience in Tokyo, and the other athletes that have been involved with your program or that you've come in contact with. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Noah Malone.
Yep.
Kyle is his dad, and he's one of the dads in the network. He's also done a podcast interview that hasn't aired yet. And these guys are just really talented young men, young boys, and you're just taken aback. At least I am. Maybe it's every day for you because this is your son, and you're just sort of desensitized to it. But from an outsider looking at a situation like Ezra's or like Noah's and so many others, it's just amazing, right? That the playbooks are being rewritten, right, for the opportunities for these young individuals. And what I'm thinking is that those little guys that are 4 and 5, 6 years old are looking up to Ezra as a 15 or 16-year-old, or looking up to Noah, who's 17 or 18. And they're saying, well, if he can do that, maybe I can do this too, Dad or Mom. And, it's a process, right? That's what I heard you describing, is that, there's an opportunity, a big opportunity coming in 2028. We've got 7 years. It's a pretty good sized runway. And I'm hoping if we can educate people like you are doing here, and that there's that ripple effect that will, permeate out, through your organization, through the Special Fathers Network and all these other organizations, that the world's a better place. We're all better human beings as a result of the type of work that you're doing. So I just want to say thank you for becoming the outspoken advocate that you have. Thank you for being involved with the Special Fathers Network. And at a very basic level, thanks for just being a great dad and a great husband.
No, thanks so much for having me. I love what you guys do, and I'm always here to support, and excited to see where this thing can go. I think I said it earlier, but there's so much power in sort of teaching us all to advocate for each other and keep an eye out for each other, because it's disability is not an easy journey. It's complicated, and information doesn't exist easily for anything. And so, I love learning more about all the different disabilities and all the different resources out there. And it's what you're doing with this group is really cool. So we're all in here at Angel City Sports.
Excellent. So we're very fortunate to have one of our other Special Fathers Network podcast dads with us, Scott Sauer from Lilburn, Georgia. And Scott was an early episode. I think it was episode number 9 of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. And I know that he's also dedicated a lot of his time over the last couple decades to athletics for individuals that have special abilities. So Scott, the Zoom stage is yours.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, I got involved, with Gloria. She's autistic, and she's 33 years old now. But way back when, it was, they first came out with a rubber field. I've never seen this before. And it was a rubber baseball field right smack in the middle of this beautiful baseball park and soccer fields and everything out in Grayson, Georgia. And it's the Special Pops Athletic Association. And they asked if you wanted to coach. So I joined up, and been there for 17, 18 years. The last 2 years, though, with COVID, we haven't been able to do it. And they're all wanting to come back. So hopefully next spring we'll get started up again. But as I became part of this group, they have competition, which is with Down syndrome kids that are really athletic, and other high functioning autistic kids. I chose the anything goes. And anything goes is everybody hits, and the last person hits a home run. Okay. And you got guys that they don't even know what's going on. You got kids that are in wheelchairs. It's incredible. And what we have that's really unique is we have the buddy system, where young kids from the high schools and junior high schools come to the field, and we pair them up with a kid, and they're really scared at first. At first, they're really nervous, and 10 minutes into it, man, they're having a ball. And coaches have come up and said they thank us all the time for allowing their kids to do it. It changes their attitude. It changes their sportsmanship, the whole 9 yards. And it's just been a blessing to do it. And I do that, and I did basketball for a long time, which was really interesting. And that was part of the Special Olympics program. Special Olympics has basketball. We have competition. I swear, if you went to at the games, there's 15 courts inside this huge place. I'm talking about kids pulling up and drilling 3-pointers and heading off the other way. I mean, they just love it. And you see it in their eyes. When I coached the baseball, I didn't give them a break. I'd get in their face, and they're in a wheelchair coming down with their buddy. I'd be writing, run, dig, and we'd call them safe. And they just go ballistic, and they just loved it. Gave a game ball. I started a game ball program where we gave them a game ball. Someone got a game ball after every game. But and what I really found interesting and what touched me the most was the parents. The parents got, for some of these real severe special needs kids, they would sit in the stands, and they would get an hour and a half just to sit and watch. and they had the best. You could just see that they really enjoy this stuff, and it's kudos to the people that run it. These people it's volunteer work, and it's tough, but it's not Paralympics. It's not anything like that. And I love the Paralympics. I mean, I never even knew about this stuff, and he's right about not getting enough exposure, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen. They're starting to get the gist, like you said. The backstories are incredible. It's something else. But yeah, I've enjoyed it. I love it. I think every parent should get their child involved in some sort of sports, and they're, like you said, they're everywhere. You just have to find it. You just have to look it up.
Scott, thanks for sharing. I'm so glad you could be on the call, and hopefully we'll have more opportunities as the months and years go by to tell some stories like this.
Sure, no problem.
That'll put a wrap on this episode of the bi-weekly Special Fathers Network Dads Zoom Call on adaptive athletics. And we'll be sure to include a lot of information, much of which was referenced here in the conversation in the show notes, so it'll make it as easy as possible for individuals to find the information that they're looking for. Special Fathers Network is part of the 21st Century Dads Foundation, which is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. With your support, we can continue to make our programming free to all concerned. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again.